When we hear the words Chinese M35, most of us would immediately think of the recent reproductions of this iconic helmet coming out of China. However, what most of us might not realize is that this iconic helmet would first see action with the nationalist Chinese troops years before the Wehrmacht warred into battle against Polish forces. Up until 1937, Germany had been helping China modernize both its army and its economy. In terms of military training, Germany had been providing China with modern equipment and military advisors to train Chinese troops, even going as far as to initially help China in their battle against invading Japanese forces. Quite ironic if you think about it, a future Axis nation helping a future Allied nation fight against another future Axis nation. SinoGerman Cooperation. The initial years. The roots of this relationship between the two countries date all the way back to the Qing dynasty, to a time when neither the Republic of China nor Nazi Germany even existed. The Qing government decided to approach Germany for help in modernizing their economy and military, as unlike other modern countries, such as Britain and France, Germany showed little interest in expanding or occupying territory in China. Germany would prove to be a very useful partner in helping the Chinese modernize their military. They would provide the Qing army with their first modern smokeless rifle, the Gewehr 1888. Along with the rifles, Germany also provided China with blueprints and production equipment for the Gewehr 88. This allowed China to domestically produce this rifle, with the domestically produced rifles being known as the Hanyang 88, or the Hanyang-made rifle, named after the Hanyang arsenal that made them. Also during this time, Germany had sold to the Qing government two ironclad warships, the Jinyuan and the Dingyuan, which were considered to be some of the most modern warships in the world at that time. Along with the two ironclads, Germany also built for China a number of protected cruisers. The ironclads, along with the cruisers, were assigned to the Chinese Beiyang fleet, effectively making it the largest and most powerful naval fleet in all of Asia up until the mid-1890s. However, following the Boxer Rebellion and the occupation of Chinese territories by foreign nations, including Germany, trade between the two nations gradually decreased. World War I would also significantly strain the relationship between the two countries, as China had joined the war against Germany, under the promise that after the war, German-held territory will be returned to China. After the war ended, the Allied nations quickly went back on their promise, and the previously German-held territories were, in the end, given to Japan. Sino-German Cooperation, the 1930s. The cooperation between the two countries would once again reach its peak after the Nazis came into power in 1933. The political structure between Germany and China, now the Republic of China, had many similarities, with one of the most notable being their firm anti-communist stance. For these reasons, among many others, Germany would once again help China modernize its military, with original plans calling for 80 divisions of Chinese troops that were to be trained by German military advisors and equipped with German equipment, although only 8 divisions were trained and equipped by the end of the cooperation between the two countries in 1937. Up until 1937, Germany had provided China with vast amounts of military equipment, from small arms to artillery and even Panzer I tanks. Among these were between 220,000 to 315,000 M35 Stahlhelms, which were the most modern helmets Germany had to offer at the time. The Chinese M35 helmet. To fulfill the Chinese contract for the M35s, two factories, ET and SE, were tasked with producing this helmet. This is one of the reasons early production M35 helmets are so rare on the collecting market today, as the majority of them were sent to China and subsequently destroyed in the decades of fighting that was to come. Heating lot numbers on these Chinese contract helmets did not exceed the low 3000s. These helmets were painted in the early apple green color and had the early unreinforced liner bands. After their arrival in China, the nationalist insignia was applied to the left side of the helmet through the use of airbrushes, and stencils, not decals. The position of the insignias were roughly equivalent to where you would expect to find German decals, being just below the rear vent and lined up with the liner rivet. Although variations of the applied insignias exist, with the differences being due to the different depots that applied them, the majority were roughly 3 centimeters in diameter, and all consists of a blue circle representing the sky, and a white sun in front of it. These Chinese-issued M35s would be used for the remainder of the war by Chinese troops against the Japanese. These surviving helmets were then used during the Chinese Civil War by both nationalist and communist troops alike, although they were quickly being replaced by helmets such as the American M1s. Some of these helmets would see service with the People's Liberation Army in the 1950s, with a limited number possibly being used in the Korean War. The decades of wars and conflicts in China meant the destruction of most of these M35 helmets. Most of those that survived were likely destroyed in the following years for scrap or for political purposes. As a result, finding one of these historical helmets nowadays is extremely difficult. Being a collector who is interested in World War II Chinese military history, acquiring a complete Chinese M35 helmet is at the top of my bucket list. Although I don't have a complete helmet right now, I am very lucky in that I do have a relic condition M35 helmet that has Chinese provenance. This M35 that you see here is actually the first helmet of my militaria collection. It was excavated from the Chinese province of Jiangxi around the Vanjialing area and had been lost during the famous Battle of Vanjialing in 1938, where the Chinese army scored one of their few early victories against the Japanese. I acquired this helmet from a well-known Chinese collector who, in 2015, loaned it to a Chinese museum for an exhibit that commemorated the 70th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. The museum made a display placard right here to go along with this helmet, and which is unfortunately damaged. It was like this when I acquired it. The information here roughly translates to German helmet used during the Battle of Vanjialing, a German M35 helmet used by the 51st Division under the command of Wang Yaowu during the attacks on the Japanese positions on Zhanggushan on October 7th, 1938. Zhanggushan was a mountain in the Vanjialing region, and it saw some of the heaviest fighting during the entire battle. Now, I won't go in depth on the battle, but if you are interested, feel free to leave a comment and let me know. The helmet itself is a typical relic condition helmet shell. No liner, no chin strap, no paint, and no markings visible on the outside or the inside. However, what does make this very interesting is the fact that at the top here, the shrapnel holes have been filled in. And on the inside, there appears to be some concrete-like material left over all along the inside of the shell. And I will see if I can get a close-up. And I do have a theory as to what possibly happened to this helmet, although it will be impossible to prove. So a lot of weapons and equipment were lost by both sides after the battle. And even today, you can still find many relics on the surface. So it is entirely possible that this helmet was excavated years after the end of the war and had been repurposed by the locals living in villages around the area. For example, it could have been used for mixing cement that was to be used for the construction of local houses, and that would explain the filling in of the holes and the residue left on the inside. However, this is just my theory, and it is, like I said, impossible to prove. And always buy the item, don't buy the story. Nevertheless, it is still a very interesting and historically significant helmet that is connected to events in history that are not very well known today. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video interesting and informative. If you would like to know more about this topic, please let me know down in the comments. Thank you for watching once again, and I will see you next time.